Good afternoon, everyone. Let me add my voice of welcome to all of you. It is extremely heartening to have all of you here because it really symbolizes a felt concern to transform our profession into a better one and to bring insights from tackling inequity elsewhere into our profession. So the proceedings are also being streamed live via YouTube, and I welcome all of those who are remotely connected to us as well. We have our colleagues who will be monitoring any messages that you might send on chat. In fact, please do send us a brief message with your name and where you're listening from and how many of you, just so we know. So I speak on behalf of all the members of the Gender and Physics Working Group of the Indian Physics Association when I say that we're all extremely grateful that so many people who were part of this process right from the beginning, which has brought us to this moment, are here with us. But there are some important people who are missing. One of them who had to pull out at the last minute is Dr. Dinakar Kanjilal, President of the Indian Physics Association, or IPA, who is also Director of the Inter-University Accelerator, which is on the JNU campus in Delhi. Dr. Kanjilal has been a pillar of support in the whole process that has brought us to this moment. He has always given us his time, despite his busy schedule as a director. If it is not clear to you already, it will become clear at the end of this session as to how important it is that people who are leaders of institutions be engaged with this question. And we have to make do, unfortunately, with just reading out a message from Dr. Kanjilal. He says, "Dear participants, I'm very sorry for my inability to participate in the discussion meeting on the gender gap in physics organized at the International Center for Theoretical Sciences by Professor Prajval Shastri, the chair of the Gender and Physics Working Group of the IPA. All activities of physics should always be open to all human beings, regardless of their gender. Women are underrepresented at all levels of physics, both in India and worldwide. However, women comprise about half the workforce and should have appropriate representation for better harmony and for faster development of the nation. I hope that the discussion meeting will give an opportunity to the participants to share their views very clearly, which may subsequently enable a shift in the development of better identity for women in physics. Thanking you, and with best wishes, Dinakar Kanjilal." So this is the first event that we as a working group are organizing. It all started in some sense a very long time ago with the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, which is the sort of global professional organization of physicists, constituting a working group on women in physics around about 2000. Their main mandate was to conduct conferences every 3 years, the International Conferences for Women in Physics, about which Professor Rashmi Lakshmi will talk more later. They got funding for these conferences, and these were meant to be crucibles of ideas for change in the profession that was clearly ridden with gender discrimination. India has been a very active participant right from the beginning in these conferences with Professors Rohini Godbole, Nilima Gupte, Sumati Rao, who hopefully is on the remote link, Anita Mehta, Shobhana Narasimhan. We're all involved very actively. So I went to the first such conference in 2011 in Cape Town as the country team leader, and participating in one of the major components of the conference, which was workshops to come up with recommendations for the profession worldwide, which then translated into resolutions and then were taken back to the respective countries. I found that every country had its own physics working group on gender in physics. It had a professional physics society, which was a forum for a vibrant discussion, and they had a gender working group. But we had none. On paper, the Indian National Science Academy is the liaison for the IUPAP. And of course, INSA has been very supportive in giving funding for participants to participate in these conferences. But they neither have the mechanism nor the bandwidth to engage with the specificities, with the real questions that plague our discipline, and do something about it, which is not very surprising because it's not necessarily a representative body. I was again team leader in the 2014 conference, and we still had nothing in terms of a national working group. Over the subsequent months, a bunch of us agreed that the right society under which to constitute such a working group was the Indian Physics Association. It is a dues-paying, membership-based professional physics society, and therefore inclusive. It is a member of the Asia-Pacific Consortium of Physical Societies. It has official sister relationships with the British Society and the American one. So on Women's Day of 2016, it so happened, a proposal was made. So this proposal got accepted sometime last year, and in May 2017, a working group got set up. All but one of them is here, and you will hear from them. In this context, I want to read out a message that the current chair of the IUPAP Working Group on Women in Physics, Dr. Gillian Butcher from Britain, has sent. So she says, as the chair of the IUPAP Working Group on Women in Physics, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to be able to congratulate you on reaching this point of launching the Gender in Physics Working Group of the IPA. These things don't just happen, but require much effort and time to organize with a great deal of groundwork necessary. Of course, the work doesn't stop here. This is just the beginning of a new chapter, which, with the commitment and enthusiasm already shown, is sure to lead to progress for women in physics in India. It's almost 20 years since IUPAP set up their own working group on women in physics to address the gender gap globally. In that time, and 6 international conferences later, much progress has been made in ways that perhaps may not have been foreseen. Those of us fortunate enough to have been involved in women in physics networks at local, national, or international level know how important the support of these networks is. There is the support of each other, the sharing of experience, and the collective strength to endeavor to make change. India, having been well represented at the EQUIP conferences and on the IUPAP working group, is very much a part of that international network. And so we, as an international community of physicists and friends, share in the joy and excitement of your new working group and wish you well for today's event and for the future. So that is Gillian Butcher at Leicester. So I put this photograph as well. So one thing I want to mention is that during the brainstorming that led to this proposal to constitute the working group, one idea that bubbled up among those of us who were brainstorming was that we would bring out 3 Indian science publications with an all-women authorship. And these actually came out last year. One was Resonance, which is an undergraduate magazine for adult science buffs published by the Indian Academy of Sciences. The other was Physics News, which is in fact the magazine of the Indian Physics Association. And the third was was a special issue of Current Science. So Current Science was edited by Professor Nilima Gupte and Professor Sulabha Kulkarni, who are both here today. Physics News was edited by me and Bindu Bamba and Vandana Nanal. Bindu is here. And Resonance was by me and a biologist colleague from Delhi. The intent was, at least that was our intent, not to showcase women's work. It was to demonstrate that it is quite ordinary and quite regular for women to do all the professional work that men do, including writing for a range of audiences, a general physics audience, an undergraduate level adult audience, science buffs, and a general research audience in the case of Current Science. The fraction of women authors was only 15% for Resonance, which is all of science, and it was a maximum of 10% and often 0% for Physics News before these special issues, which clearly showed that when the editorial board is thinking scientist, they're only thinking male scientist. And the message that we were trying to get across is that editorial boards of such magazines have a duty and a responsibility to project the idea that everybody, regardless of gender, is equally capable of being a scientist and a science writer. Whereas what they were actually doing was the opposite. They were only mirroring the patriarchy in society as a whole. So some of the authors are here in the audience, Rama Govindarajan, Roni Godbole, Bindu Bamba. And mind you, these authors were taking a serious risk because a typical professional ambience looks down upon women who work towards gender equity as wanting to just get favors for themselves. And they become vulnerable to the quality of their work being questioned. So we basically answered the question, is there a shortage of women who can competently write science articles? And the answer, of course, is no. And incidentally, one more such special issue of Resonance is just out this month, edited by physicist Pratibha Jolly, who's also the principal of Miranda House in Delhi. So while we listen to the subsequent talks, there are a few things that I suggest we be mindful about. The profession has not found it easy to acknowledge that there is a gender bias within the profession. But the government has, and has pumped in significant amounts of funding to rectify the problem. However, most people's response to why there is a gender gap is that it is because of the discriminatory familial responsibilities that women face in society. In fact, most often it is not even seen as a discriminatory responsibility. This patriarchal mindset, and by patriarchy I mean institutionalized sexism, plagues the interventions rather heavily. You just have to read the text on the webpage of the mobility scheme that the Department of Science and Technology is considering. So most interventions adopt the course of fixing the women, increasing their skills, their confidence, all that. But there is no evidence that has been presented which demonstrates that women preferentially lack skills. The evidence is actually the opposite, that there is no productivity deficit, for example, the study of Neelam Kumar many years ago, that there is no caliber deficit, the study by Subramaniam many years ago. There is also no evidence that girls are less interested in science. We've shown evidence to the contrary in our papers at the equipped conferences. And while discriminatory familial responsibilities does appear to be a factor, it is not the whole story. There is significant evidence, and not just anecdotal, that there is severe bias within the profession. And biology, for example, has a lower gender gap than physics, which cannot be attributed to discriminatory familial responsibilities. It is therefore extremely important to actively learn from the insights that social scientists present before us and to collaborate with them. It is extremely important to internalize that gender is a social construct, not given to us by nature, but created by society. Professor Anita Kurup, a sociologist from NIAS, led a very large study a few years ago, commissioned by the Indian Academy of Sciences in collaboration with Rohini Godbole and others, titled Trained Scientific Women Power, How Much Are We Losing and Why?, with some very powerful insights. I particularly want to stress this, and this idea of taking insights from social sciences and collaborating with them, because traditional physicists, particularly those trained in India, we are trained to think that we understand the whole universe and we don't need anybody else's insights on any matter. Again, Anita Kurup hopefully will be here soon, and we'll hear more from her. In that context, and I'm quoting bell hooks here, it is important to be mindful that right from birth, all of us, whether men or women, are socialized to accept sexist thought and sexist action. So while the benefits of sexism might preferentially go to the men, all of us are sexist to some extent or another, and therefore change demands that we be mindful and we transform ourselves. Maitri Gopalakrishna, who's more of an expert in that field, will also talk to us today. So I want to mention the Global Gender Gap Project by the International Council of Science. So the International Council of Science is a non-governmental organization with a global membership of national bodies and the international scientific unions as well. This is a project funded by ICSU with the collaboration of several of the unions, including physics, mathematics, chemistry, astronomy, history and philosophy of science, and so forth. And it is titled A Global Approach to the Gender Gap in Mathematical and Natural Sciences, How to Measure It, How to Reduce It. So it has set itself 3 tasks: a joint global survey, a data-backed study on publications, and creating a database of good practices. So the first one, the joint global survey, has begun. So I attended a workshop in Taipei a few months ago, which was meant to vet the survey among people of different countries. The survey is sort of a building up on the global physics survey, which happened a few years ago, and some of you might have been respondents to that survey. And so this one is going to be translated into many languages internationally. Because of the process involved, hopefully the cultural aspects of different countries have been accounted for. And it is expected to come out in a few months. So the physicists in this audience or other scientists, you might get information about the survey. Please make sure that you give it wide publicity and respond to it. Because the response from the physics community to the Global Gender Gap Survey in Physics a few years ago was not that great from India. So someone has said that the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Whose quote that is a homework problem. But we are here today to debate about how to change our world, our little world, the physics profession in India. We, as a working group of the Indian Physics Association, are here with the goal to dissolve the working group by making it irrelevant. It is not clear that that day will arrive in our lifetimes or in my lifetime, but we do believe that it will arrive.